BS. I'm calling BS. I'm calling BS. My values completely changed.
I think they change.
Me
Absolutely.
too.
Because with every life experience,
Yes.
things will change for you in your mind. Your perspective will change. And yeah, I totally think that the values change. So, welcome back to the Professional Rule Breaker Podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Walterhouse, and I am so happy that you're here. But before we start today, because today we have a killer show, I want to make sure that you don't miss any of our episodes. So, make sure that you hit subscribe. And as I mentioned, we have a really killer, amazing show today because we have this guest that is so powerful. She is a friend of mine, and she's the founder of Success Coaching Solution, who has dedicated her life to empowering others to create a greater impact. She's also a #1 best-selling author, and her book is called Standing Strong, the real life story of overcoming adversity and becoming unstoppable in life and business. And she believes the biggest challenge in life is to become all that you have the possibility to become. So I want to welcome my good friend, Tina Brandau.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I'm so excited to talk with you every time we get together.
I'm really happy to have you here. I know that we've been planning on doing this for a while, and I'm super excited to share you with my audience. And like I mentioned, you know, this is going to be a killer show. You have such a powerful story that I want to make sure that everyone hears. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background?
I absolutely would love to. So my background itself is I'm corporate America. I am C-suite executive. I am climbing corporate ladder. I have done all of those things. And now I sit in front of you a very different person, yet still climbing ladders. Today, I sit in front of you as a best-selling author and a national and international speaker. Both realms collided. One came from an unexpected source. The other came as a result of that situation, we'll call it. We'll just call it
A little situation. Is
a
that all
little
it is?
situation. Okay, it was a big deal. But again, climbing the corporate ladder, I had reached all the heights. You know, you made it to where I wanted to make it to. I was doing the things that I had dreamt of doing until literally I couldn't do anything for myself.
Interesting. What do you mean that you couldn't do anything for yourself?
Well, let me take you back. Let me take you back to the day when my life was on fire. I know you well enough to know you've had these days when you're just on fire. Everything's just perfect. Your energy's good. You're just killing it. And you feel like there is nothing in the world you can't do.
Right.
I had one of those days, and I actually was training for a marathon when I was having one of those days. And I met my fate at the moment where a tree actually fell and hit me. And as the tree hit me, it caused a very serious accident where I had to relearn how to do everything in life. I even had to relearn how to learn all over again. I literally started with the capacity and capability of a very young child at the age of 40.
Wow.
Yeah. It was not something I ever anticipated or expected.
But do you think that that moment, I mean, it was such a profound thing that happened to you and brought you back to almost being childlike?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I call it the absolute most amazing experiment. It wasn't only an experience. I got to experiment. Think about this for a minute, right? We're often in a table with other adults in a room where there's children, and children are at the children's table, adults are at the adult table, and they may intermingle a little bit. I was functioning like a young child sitting at the adult table. And I have to say this, and I want all your listeners to hear this. Adults are so dang complicated. We're making it so much harder than we have to. And I got to experience that through the eyes of a young child looking at it. And it really just was amazing. The things we do to ourselves, the things we don't do for ourselves, the ways we interact. It was such an amazing experiment in my life. Now, I really wish I could have gotten that without having to gone through it.
Right.
But I am so blessed to have had that opportunity to get to see life differently, because it takes a whole lot now. First of all, there is no reason, no logic that I'm alive today. This accident should have killed me. All the physicians were just totally amazed. And they said to my husband, people have these accidents all the time. You just don't hear about them because the people don't live to tell the story.
Wow.
Or if they do live to tell the story, they don't have the capacity and capability of telling their story. So I found myself blessed twice, even though I had to learn how to do everything in life all over again.
And I know that experience, must have affected you a lot. And I know how hard it must have been. I had an experience in which I had knee surgery and didn't go quite as planned. And I had to learn how to walk all over again. And that was an eye-opening experience for me. So I can't imagine, that experience of having to learn to talk, think, in the capacity that you had done before. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it also helped you kind of like shape who you are today and gave you a completely different perspective. Because before you were like corporate, I'm training for a marathon, that was your road. But now, because of your experiences, things have changed for you. So, why, first off, do you share this story? Because I know that's part of your book, is that you're sharing your story. So tell me why.
So the reason is so simple. And you'll find that I use the word simple all the time, because my life now is simple. I have great success, but it's simple. Because again, adults are super complicated. So simply, why did I write this book? Was to help one person. If I could go from A to Z, because truly I was at A. If I could go from A to Z, you can go from your H to P.
Right.
You can do this. You can do what's ahead of you. I will tell you that there were people who, frankly, there's not a person alive that I have ever met that would say to me, oh, you should get up and go do it. Everyone understood. If I didn't do anything ever again but sit on my couch, they're like, of course she was hit by a tree. Of course. It was almost.
But you didn't want to be labeled that. I know you. You didn't.
Not going to be labeled, because when an incident happens to you, and I call it an incident. Okay, let's call it a flat out accident. When it happens,
it was something big. Yes.
Or it doesn't even have to be big. It can be a good change. Mm-hmm. When you're any type of change that you're dealing with, the immediate thing that happens is it either disrupts you or destructs you. Those are the two options. I was physically distracted. I couldn't do for myself. I couldn't put two words together to ask for a hot dog. Okay, that wasn't happening. My poor puppy, I'd had her for a decade, more than a decade, and her name became Dog because I couldn't remember it. I was a mess. I was distracted, and I had to learn to be patient. I had to learn to let my body heal. And I don't know about you, but I think you know this about me. I'm a little bit of a type A, maybe A+ person.
Really? Gosh, I would never have been able to tell.
A little bit. And at the time, I was functioning like a 3-year-old. Believe it or not, there are actual tests that tell you what your functioning level is at. And I was functioning like a 3-year-old. So I have a 3-year-old temperament. I have a 3-year-old cognitive ability, and I have to be patient. I don't know how many 3-year-olds you've been around lately, but most of them are not very patient. And I was already not patient. You add that to my functioning, and I was definitely a handful for my family and my friends and all my loved ones. But you had to stop and be patient long enough for you to move to the next D. And immediately the next D becomes being defined by it. So whatever your changes that you're dealing with in this moment, whether you're getting a promotion or you're starting a business or your business is scaling or you're getting a divorce or you're getting married or you're having a baby, whatever change it is, you're going to be defined by that at some point in time. And then you have to do that brave, brave, brave word. You have to make a decision. And once I made this one decision, everything else changed for me.
And what was that?
The decision was to let it develop me. How will this develop me? How will this develop me? And the questions that I started asking were different. And I did. I graduated. In fact, the doctors told me, congratulations, you've reached MMI. Okay, let's be clear. I did not know what MMI meant. All I knew at the time was what M&Ms were. I did not know what MMI was. So they explained to me that MMI was my maximum medical improvement. And they actually congratulated me and thought this was a great big deal. And my MMI was a 7-year-old. Now, I'm going to spoil it for everybody. I no longer function like a 7-year-old, but I can still act like one when I want to.
So what do you think? I mean, what was that one, I would say that one thing that as everyone's saying, okay, you've reached your maximum capability. What was that one thing that propelled you to move forward, to keep going?
So you must have read my book because that's exactly what I walk through in the book. So the first thing that I had to do was to know where it was I was going, right? Because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. So how I went about that is very different than how I went about it in my corporate world. In my corporate world, I set my BHAGs, or your big, hairy, audacious goals. And so when I thought to myself, I'm going to be me and I'm going to be another executive again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this. That thought was so foreign to me. Like I literally couldn't put food on a spoon, let alone get it to my mouth. But yet I think I'm going to be an executive. My brain, it was a too big of a chasm. My brain couldn't process it. And unfortunately, at the time when my brain couldn't process, I went into seizures. So it was too big for me. So I had to figure out how to break it down. And what I realized was some of the things that I had been teaching executives and leaders to do for decades was working against me. So I had to do what I could do and knew how to do, which was to make things simpler for people to learn. So I broke mine down. And here's the thing, Kathy, that's so cool. I could not, okay, this isn't really the cool part, but it gets cool afterwards. So I couldn't make my hands go together to clap, right? My hands would pass by each other because my fine motor skills were just gone. So like left and right hands would swing past each other instead of clapping. So as I was trying to get my fine motor skills back, they gave me this little tiny plastic cup that had these little tiny plastic peas in it with a little tiny pair of tweezers. And I had to pick up one of the peas out of the cup and move it over to another little cup and drop it. Some days I could move my 30 peas in an hour. Some days it took me 8 hours to move those 30 peas because I would pick them up and they would drop, or I'd drop the tweezers, or whatever the case was. I had to do it one pea at a time. I had to break it down into the smallest increment I could handle at that time. And those things are different timelines and timeframes for us, depending on who we are and where we are in life. Maybe you can do a giant chasm step and somebody else needs to just do a moderate step. And for me, I had to do a micro step. So knowing that it's okay to take whatever size step is the right size step for you in that moment. Because when you take your right size step, you reach your goal. If you try to take somebody else's size step, it doesn't work. And please, for our love of all things, can we get rid of the diseases that we have? Because we have a lot of diseases. They all end in itis, like comparisonitis, judgmentitis, attitudeitis. Can we just get rid of our itises for a moment and say this? If you have air in your lungs today, you have the ability to do what you want to do. Some people have to work harder at it than other people do. And some people will give up before other people will. But if you take that next step, that's the right step for you, and you know where you're going, you will get there. You also, though, have to know, and this is, like, as I say, you break it down exactly what I wrote in the book. The next thing you have to know is who you are. And you mentioned something earlier that just struck my heart so hard. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was doing all those things, right? I was aspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And I now tell people, and this is such the essence of who I've become. I went from aspiring before I expire to now living to inspire before I expire. I
I
changed
love
my
that.
vowels and I changed my whole mission. And I'm going to say this other little piece to you. In order to know that and who you are, you've got to know your values. And I've had so many people say to me, but Tina, values don't change. BS. I'm calling BS. I'm calling BS. My
I
values completely changed.
I think they change.
You
Absolutely.
do.
Because with every life experience,
Yes.
things will change for you in your mind. Your perspective will change.
Yes.
And yeah, I totally think that the values change. But I kind of want to rewind it a little bit
Sure.
because I want to, I, the message, the underlying message that I'm hearing is that you were willing to take the next step always. You were willing, because there were probably a lot of people that would give up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a big message in that as far as like, because you didn't know, I mean, every day you were working with that little cup with the peas, probably the very first time they gave it to you, you didn't know if you could do it or not, but you gave it everything that you could so that you would actually finish it. So it's like starting before, you know, you even think you're ready. But also,
Oh, go ahead.
it's that unstoppability that I think is, I wouldn't say it's even a skill, but it's something that you see people that achieve whatever their dreams or goals are, they have that innate unstoppability. So, how do you teach people to be unstoppable? Because obviously you're unstoppable. I know I'm unstoppable, but how do you teach people to be unstoppable?
Well, the first part of it is you're not always unstoppable, and you have to be okay with that. Sometimes you get stopped, and
Right?
sometimes you have, in my case, some would say I was hard-headed enough that I had to get hit upside the head, hit upside the head with the tree so that I would stop. But sometimes you get stopped, and it's okay if you're stopping to rest. It's not okay if you're stopping to stop.
Right, to give up. Because I
Give up.
think when you get stopped, there's a lesson in it, right?
Mhm.
And then secondly, at least the way that my mind thinks, I'm like, okay, I've been stopped. What's my way around it? You know, what's my little wiggle that I can do, my pivot or whatever it is that I can do to get around it? Because I have this saying, when there's a will, there's a way.
The way. It goes back to that D, right? Develop me. So when
Mhm.
I'm stopped, how can this stopping develop me in the moment? Does my body really? And there were days, if I added 2 + 2 together, I would have a seizure. And
Mhm.
this is after I'd gotten better. My brain could not be taxed. I had to give it the space it needed. But then going back and picking up where you left off is so super key and important. You just have to continually do that. And sometimes you're not capable of doing that on your own. You don't believe it on your own. And for
Mhm.
me, there are 3 things I think that are absolutely essential. And I talk about those in the book too. I swear you've read the whole book inside out. The first is that accountability matters. You absolutely need accountability in your life. I had people in physical therapy and occupational therapy. I had physicians, I had family members, I had everybody looking to see what I had done, had I accomplished, had I not. I had accountability baked in. That made a huge difference. And in fact, we know from the corporate world and from entrepreneurial space that if you have accountability baked in, you are so much more likely to actually achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Accountability is number one, and one of the pieces that you absolutely have to have. Second are the thoughts that you're having and being able to wrangle those thoughts inside your head. Because, and I talk about imposter syndrome inside of the book, and it is such a derailer for so many people. And then how you utilize your thoughts to be able to propel you forward. So giving yourself the place to rest, giving yourself the permission to build a system of accountability, and then most importantly, wrangling your thoughts. That's how you become unstoppable. But the icing on the cake, after all that whole cake is built and it's got a beautiful foundation and it smells amazing, you have to ice it with having the right aim, which I write about in the book. And that's the best part of the whole book, if you ask me, because it's the stories of how I saw adults acting. And the aim is your attitude, your inspiration, and your motivation. Because if you don't have the right aim, you're not going to hit the target you want to hit. So you have to know where you're going. You have to have your right values. You have to have a plan to get there with some accountability and the right thoughts to get you the right aim. And when you put all that together, you become absolutely unstoppable. And if you still are not unstoppable, sometimes you just don't believe you can.
Right.
And that, my friend, is when you need to have somebody in your life that you can borrow their belief in you. Find someone that does believe you can do it and spend time with them. We know we become like the 5 people we spend the most time with, but it's not always just 5 people. There might be someone who believes you can do it. Borrow their belief until you build enough of your own belief to carry on yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, goes through those ebbs and flows.
Oh, yes.
Of, you're unstoppable. You have everything going. You can do it. And then for whatever reason, something derails you. And like for me, like if I have one of those moments, I literally, and I even remember what I used to tell my salespeople as well. I would be like, go out and just go do something different. If you're having a bad day, just go have fun. It's almost like that saying, go to a field and pick some daisies or whatever it might be.
Nature matters. Get out.
Right. Just step away from it for a moment, because I think sometimes it's that tunnel vision and just focusing on that, whatever it is. And maybe you're not seeing the big picture, but you step away from it. But yeah. I love how you brought up borrowing other people's confidence or belief in you, because I think that is actually really underutilized.
Yes, it absolutely is. If I had not had the belief around me that I had, I may not be sitting here today, because let's face it, all the adults around me could do all these amazing things, and I couldn't stand up and take a step without having somebody hold me. When you have that borrowed belief that you can do something, when you're not sure, you're not 100% sure, you want to believe, and you should believe, and you want to do what that thing is. Sometimes you just don't have enough in your tank to do that. And you just borrow a little bit of theirs, and you'll be surprised how quickly your tank fills up with belief.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if it's someone that you believe in.
Oh, yes. Makes a world of difference.
Not just like some random stranger going, yeah, you can do it.
Right.
Which I suppose you could borrow if you have no one else, then you could borrow their optimism.
But if it's somebody that you respect and you believe in them, and you know that they're a credible source, and you know that they are someone you look up to and respect, it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you said something early on, which is kind of one of my big words for the year.
Oh, what did I say?
Office, I have a giant Post-it note that has this on there. But you said simple.
Simple.
So let's talk about that. How making things simple can really help you.
I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't made things simple. So moving the peas, I couldn't move the peas and have a conversation at the same time. I couldn't multitask. Please, for the love of all things, stop multitasking, everybody. Stop multitasking. Your brain does not operate well that way. And
Tell me why we should stop multitasking.
Because you actually are, your brain, it's not counterproductive. Your brain does not function well. If you have a disruption from what you're doing of any kind, let's say that you're talking to me right now and you answer an email. It takes you 20 minutes to get back to the place we were in our conversation, or to work on what you were working on. And I don't know about you, but I don't have 20 minutes to give up.
Right.
Over and over and over throughout my day. So your brain does not work optimally multitasking. Now, I have to say though, if you ever run into my son, he is in his 20s now, and he will tell you that his mother used to make him lunch while cooking with her foot on the stove and doing his homework at the same time and doing all three things and taking a phone call. So that's how I used to operate, because I thought I was so much more effective. The truth of the matter is I had to relearn how to learn, and I learned how to be more effective. And I never would have taken the time or believed it. I never would have believed it before until I actually did it again. So simply starting with one task in front of you with focus. And I don't mean focus like I'm going to work on this for the next 24 hours. That's not the focus I'm talking about. I'm talking about using your body's natural, or your brain's natural rhythms, to get you to be the most effective you can be. And simply taking that next one logical step in front of you. Please don't create 5-year goals. You can have a 5-year plan that you're thinking about. I want to have a 7-figure business in 5 years. Great. That's a great thing. But now break it down to, what are you doing in the next 30 days? What are you doing in the next 30 minutes? What are you doing in the next 30 seconds? Keep it simple, because if you're focused on the 5-year, you need to know where you're going, of course. But if you're focused on 5 years, you're not going to keep it simple. You're going to do too many things at one time, and you're going to lose the effectiveness and momentum that you could have. And so, and adults, let's talk about interactions with adults. Simply stated, we love to rationalize, or I call it irrationalize, what's happening in our world. I can't do that, because, in fact, if I ask anybody listening right now to tell me what you want for dinner, most likely I would get a list of things you don't want, because we're really good at saying what we don't want.
Interesting. Okay.
Really good at it. Really good at it. I actually used to call it the don'ts. They have the don'ts. I don't want. What do you want from your business? I don't want to have as few leads as I have today. I don't want to make only what I'm making right now. I don't want to deal with customers or clients I don't like. Those are the don'ts that start coming up, instead of, you know what, I want to make an extra $10,000 this month.
I feel that if you approach things I would say positive, or like the glass is half full.
Yes.
Rather than when you're focusing on all the stuff you don't want, that's what you're going to get, is a bunch more things that you don't want.
Yes.
Because that's what you're you're focusing on it. You're probably doing things to get you to that area of the don't want.
Correct.
Versus on having something bigger, that you're like, okay, so what can I do today? Because that's one of the things I teach. What can you do today to move the needle forward? That one thing.
Yes.
To move that needle forward in X.
Yes.
And actually there's 3 questions that I ask, but like just for the business itself, what's that one thing?
Yes.
And also I think if you focus it on that way, it almost brings, I wouldn't say it's like a fun or a something to it. It gives you more excitement, or more, I don't know. If you have it simpler,
it gives you energy.
You can finish it. You can go, you have a moment of, yeah, I just did this, or whatever it is, so that that you're making, that one step. It's kind of like, how do you walk a mile? You start with one step, and then it's a second step, and a third step. You don't go, wait a minute, I need to do, 5,000 steps right now. No.
That's right. And I think when we talk about simplicity, what you're talking about is utilizing your brain for a reward center. That's really what it is. Break it down super simple, get the accomplishment, let your brain release the feel-good chemicals, and then you're going to want to do that next one thing. And you create a habit of keeping it simple, because you do simple and reward, simple and reward, simple and reward. In fact, one of the things I had to do was simple and reward. And the reward was not having a seizure. That was simple and reward, simple and reward, simple and reward. And if I did not keep it simple, it was complex and punishment, right? So keeping it simple was so super important in my world. And that's one of the things I've held on tightly to. I will not overcomplicate something. I will break it down to the most simplistic fashion and do much like you just said. What's that one little step you can take right here, right now to make it easier? And once we learn to do that, life gets easy. Life gets really easy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Life gets easy and everything gets easy.
Yes.
Everything. Your business gets easier. Everything gets there is a change. I think it's almost like you have to change your mindset. Really.
Habits.
And your habits.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the habits. Yes. Wow. Well, I could probably talk to you, and that we've had conversations that have lasted a very, very long time. I could talk to you for a really long time, but I want to ask you, because I think that you have something really wonderful that you're offering to all of the listeners for free. So tell us about that.
I do. So one of the things that I love to do for people is to offer them. So my book itself, the first half is the story, which is really a cool story to read in and of itself. But the second half are all the lessons that I learned. So I'm offering to all of your listeners the opportunity to pick up a free copy of the first lesson of the book if they would like to have that and read through. And that's talking about knowing where you're going. And it really is it's eye-opening for people. In fact, I've had many people say to me that was one of their favorite lessons in the book, was how to do that. So I offer that to people for free, and I'd love for them to pick it up on my website. Another thing I'm doing, though, and you heard me talk a lot about accountability, is at the end of this month, I will be launching a group that is specifically built for accountability and community for entrepreneurs. And that will be available also in the same place on my website.
That's fantastic. Well, that information, we will put some links in the show notes so that everyone that is listening, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that everyone gets Tina's book, because it is a real gem. And of course, go to her website as well. And I just want to thank you for being here, because I think first off, you have such a glow, and for everybody that can't see, they're listening, she has a glow about her, but she just has this really great positive energy. And she really is passionate about helping entrepreneurs out there and helping people really achieve all that they can achieve. And I loved having you here, because my goal is always to help entrepreneurs and growth companies and everyone that's listening to this podcast, whether you're in business or you're not in business, to really get a couple nuggets from it that it can affect your life and move you in a positive direction. Because all of you that are listening here, I'm having a little bit of a Southern twang that just came out. All you alls that are listening, you are all special, and you all have something really unique to offer in this world. So don't let anything stop you. And if something does stop you, kind of peek around the corner and figure out a way to get past it. Because as I said, you have something so unique, and it really would be something sad for the world if you weren't able to share what it is that you have, your gifts to the world. So again, thank you for tuning in. I love you all. And thank you, Tina, for being a guest today at the Professional Rule Breaker podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy.